Alright, gonna try to fix this shaky wheel on the back here. This isn't a loose ball bearing hub, it's a sealed hub. So we're gonna take off this old cassette and see how we go. So yeah, I wanted to do this for a while, but it's one of those things that you kind of forget about because it takes a little bit. So yeah, we'll see how long it takes today. Alright, so you can see this is the oldest style freewheel, and you can actually put a tool in there. This is Dura-Ace 7400, and these are the tools. You can see this is your standard one, this is the older one. The splines are slightly thinner. You can see these are deeper here. When I chucked the tool on, it didn't fit for some reason, so I ended up measuring the outer diameter of the tool as well as the inside the hole there, just to make sure it's right. Ended up being 24 mil, which is right. There's another one which is 20. You can see this thing pops out a little bit there. But yeah, it's the right tool, I think, so I'm going to try to clean it out. Here it is. I just clean it out basically with nylon brush, and the tip would kind of fit in. So I thought I was heading in the right direction. It was super tight still, but eventually with enough kind of cleaning and force, it popped in. Here I try to get it off with the shifter, and yeah, no matter how much pressure I put on it, it didn't come off. So I thought it's probably time to break out the breaker bar. I also sprayed a little bit of penetrating oil just in that gap there, hopefully to free up the freewheel. And yeah, I tried it again with the shifter, but no luck. So the annoying thing, I guess, is to take out the breaker bar, which is part of my stand, so I had to move my bike somewhere else. The breaker bar is just basically a pipe inside my stand. I just use that, and then you just shove the shifter onto the end of the hole to give you more leverage, and then yeah, it should work. I gotta say, this is probably one of the tightest freewheels that I try to remove. You can see I'm putting tons of pressure on it, just putting leverage right on the end. Eventually it started turning, and when it turned, it didn't even really release. It was still super tight, but at least now I knew I could remove it. So a good sign was when I got it off, it was pretty greased up. I'm not sure why it still was so seized on there, but yeah, I think there was more grease, less grease on the threads, so maybe that was an issue. But yeah, basically just cleaned it up. Just be careful, there's some spaces in there, just very small thin washers. But yeah, this was it. So I ended up putting those caps back on it and then just wiggle it around. It's trying to find out where the play was coming from. I think it's from the bearings, but I'm not sure. It feels pretty tight, everything's pretty tight in there. So I decided just to chuck it back on the frame to see if it was not the freewheel, but in fact the bearings. Pretty sure it's not the freewheel, but just want to double check from the process of elimination. So you got everything on there, make sure the skewer was tight, and yeah, it's still shaky, so it definitely must be something to do with the bearings or the washers. So I had no idea how to get the bearings out. I thought the spindle would just come out, but it didn't come out. It was like stuck on there, and I decided to just lightly hammer the axle there, and then the bearings started popping out, which was awesome. But they pop out a little bit of the way, but then you can see it going back in here. So I had no idea what was going on, and I decided to just look online, see if I can find a manual or something to see how it works. So I found this schematic off retrobike.co.uk or bike forums, can't remember what it was, but I found out that it has a elastomer seal, like a cone elastomer seal, so probably the air pressure is holding it in, and there was nothing else holding it in. So if I pushed it back in and pull it back out, it should kind of release, which luckily it did, which I'm pretty happy about. Yeah, it's always good to double check so you don't break anything. But here you can see it's actually corroded a bit. You can see it's kind of brown, so it means that water got in there, or I don't know, some rust started happening. So yeah, it's not looking good in there. Hopefully I can clean that up a bit, but at least it's out. Another thing that was concerning was the bearing didn't come off the spindle even when I pulled on it, and I'm pretty sure the spindle should just be straight gauge all the way through. So I'm gonna have to work out how to take that bearing out. Here I decided to keep trekking on and take out the bushing that's in there. You can see you can just pull it out with your finger. This one wasn't so bad. Just be careful not to damage it again. These seals were in pretty good condition. I definitely had worse condition ones with still held their shape and wasn't soft or anything. You can see here's the grease guard hole. This is how it works. The little grease goes through that hole and straight into the bearing. And then once that side was done, I wanted to take out the other bearing, but I had no idea how to take it out, and I thought maybe the best way would just be to tap it through, kind of similar to what I did on the other side to get the other bearing out. But yeah, you can see what happened there. Definitely wasn't a good idea. It popped the middle of the bearing out, and now it's probably going to make it way harder to get that other bearing off. You can see here it came out, so it means the bearings and race is still in there. So yeah, after that happened, I was like, what a shame. That's going to be super difficult to get out. But, you know, got to keep pushing on, see what we can do. So I decided to take the cover off, but it was so hard to take it off, just that little washer. Couldn't understand why. And then I ended up looking at the other bearing that already came off, and I realized that it was super glued in. So for some reason, if you can see that slight oval bit, it was like super glued in there, and that was this area where my spoke is all filled with glue. So had to go the hard way and scrape all the glue out, and eventually I was able to find an edge and pop it up. But yeah, I was unsure why they put glue in the little washer here. I think basically they didn't want anyone to undo it or take it apart. I don't think these bearings are meant to be serviced or whatever, but they're just meant to be replaced. But eventually I was able to get it. But yeah, there was glue all around that metal ring as well. But eventually, yeah, came out. But yeah, it was a huge mission. So yeah, here I'm just taking off the cover off. That came out pretty easy after that. You can see there's little bits of glue, round bit of glue that came off. And then this bearing, yeah, just popped out. So yeah, that was all out. But I still got to get the bearing sleeve out as well. So I think basically what happened was some moisture must have got in there and it must have seized up a bit. So I ended up putting some penetrating oil just in between the gap here. Being careful not to get it on the inner seal because I don't want that to deteriorate or damage it. So what I ended up doing was I tried a few different things, but yeah, try to get a lever, brake lever, try to pull it out, try not damage the race or anything, but I realized that I could try to take the seal from the inside out, just pull it out because it's flexible, and then maybe I can get something in there to tap on the inner side of the bearing. My camera actually ran out of battery there, but I could actually just pull the seal out, just shown here. Then I ended up using the spindle that I had just to put it on right on that edge there. It's a very small edge, but I could tap on it and I could see it moving, so I knew I was going in the right direction. And then yeah, basically just repeat it all the way around, and it finally came off. At this point I was thinking probably should have just left it on the bike, but it's gone too deep now, so got to go for it. Took me ages to try to put the bearing back together, just it wouldn't fit for some reason. I also looked online for replacement bearings. They seem kind of hard to get because this is like American size. It's 1 1/8 outer and 1/8 on the inner, so it's a little bit hard. But I decided I could just rebuild the bearings in the meantime anyway, just so I don't have a bike in parts everywhere. And I realized that there was still glue on the shell or the cover here, and it was stopping the C-clip from properly seating into the bearing. So I had to go around and scrape this little plastic thing off all the glue, being careful that I don't break it. And eventually, yeah, it fit in, so I was happy with that. After that, I needed to take a break. It was like dinner time or whatever, so I put it off holder for a while, and then decided to just chuck this in a vapor rust overnight since it was pretty gnarly. But yeah, basically I had enough for one day, so take a look at it tomorrow and hopefully it works out better. Alright, let's see if it did anything. This is the next morning. So it made it darker, and I'll just give it a wash and then a buff up, see what it looks like. Alright, you can see here that it's kind of pitted on the inside where moisture was able to get into. And what I'm going to do is give it a light sand just to make sure it doesn't stop the bearings from moving when it's on here. This side's pretty smooth over here, but this side's a little bit rougher. So yeah, I don't want to take too much off, but I want to make it smooth. I was wondering if having the bearings stop on the spindle was causing it to make a gap within the hub. Probably it's just worn bearings, but I may as well smooth it over just to make sure that wasn't an issue. And then here it is, all done. This is where using your hand versus a machine is good, because you can feel where the bumps are when you're sanding on the other side of the paper. You can see it's still pretty tight, but I'm able to get the bearing all the way through, and it's not stopping, where previously it wouldn't even go past a certain point. But yeah, pretty happy with this. And then I just gave it another quick clean just to finish it up, and I was ready to go. Time to put the bearing together, and here's all the stuff. You can see C-clip, the little bearing holder, and then the race on the inside, and all the old bearings. I also had these new bearings, which I just wanted to make sure the same size. Maybe I could use some new bearings in there, so I ended up just measuring it, the old bearing and the new bearing, and they turned out to be the exact same size. So I ended up using new bearings. Off video, I did pre-fit it with the old bearings to make sure everything went back together. You can kind of just push it back together, just how this kind of bearing is designed. It's probably not the best way to do it, but it still works for what I need it for. And basically I just put on the shield, put on the C-clip like that, turn upside down, put this inner race the right way up, load it up with bearings, and then slowly put it on top. Make sure none of the bearings fall out now, and then you can kind of like just shake it to make sure it goes in there. And then what you're going to do is just press on it hard, and it should pop in. It might be a hard take a little bit of time, but eventually, yeah, you'll get there. And then what I did here was just load it up with grease again, and yeah, pretty good. I can probably hear people who watch Hambini screaming right now, you don't service bearings because they're not made to be serviced, but this will at least get me going for a bit until my new bearings come in, and then yeah, end up cleaning the seals as well. So now I can install them back in the same order. While I got it all undone, I can show you how the grease guard works. Basically, you just put your grease guard in this hole, you squeeze, and then grease comes out of this little hole. All the grease goes into the back of the bearing, and then the bushing stops or guides the grease into the bearing. Here it is with the bushing in. You just have the channel side facing towards you, and then yeah, it will just push it into the bearing. I read that if you get replacement bearings with 2 shields, you just pop one of the shields off on the back and then have that facing inwards, and the grease should work. So all that's done, just push the bearings in, make sure you grease it up all around so you can get them off again if you need to, but yeah, they just push in. In hindsight, I could have loaded up more grease in the bearings at this moment, but I ended up just putting on the other side. I had the grease holes anyway, so I can load it up after. But yeah, just push it through. And now to put all the grease in. If you keep an eye on the bearing cover, you can actually see it turn red. And then if you keep squeezing, basically the grease is going to come out of where the axle gap is. It's pretty funny. I think most people, when they do this, everything's clamped together, but it's actually pushing out the entire bearing. But yeah, it's a little hard to show you what actually happens with everything clamped together, but you can see when I keep the bearing in there, it pushes all the old grease out. This is the other side of the bearing where I didn't replace anything, I just kept it. You You can see this is all the old grease. So what people do is they put enough grease there till clean grease comes out, and then yeah, essentially your bearings are refreshed. Some people might ask, why didn't I replace the bearings in this bearing with new bearings? It's because if I take it apart, I think the tolerances aren't going to be that good. So at that point I may as well get new sealed bearings anyway. So this is kind of just to keep it rolling for now. Hopefully it's a little bit better. And then yeah, just put all the washers back on, clamp everything together, clean it up, and put some grease on this threaded side, and put the cassette back on. Cassette just screws on, and I just tighten it by hand, but then once I start riding it'll tighten even more. Or you can put the brake on your back wheel and then push the pedal forward and it should tighten. But yeah, make sure you load it up with grease so you don't have a hard time getting it off again. And then yeah, just put it back on the wheel. I had to adjust the brakes a little bit just because my tire was so fat. I think it must have knocked the brake pads. And then because I had so much grease and stuff everywhere on my hands, I end up using brake cleaner just to clean the rims, just to keep it fresh. Make sure it doesn't squeal. Alright, moment of truth. So yeah, there you go. This actually feels way better than before, way less play. There still is a tiny little bit of play, which I suspect because it's old bearings or whatever, there's no way you can kind of refix that. But at least now I know how to take off the hub and replace the bearings. When I get new bearings, I can put them in. Should be sweet. It was a huge mission, I think, but I'm happy that I did it. Hopefully I saved someone some time out there by having done this. But yeah, who knows. Hope you guys liked the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.